really important to have a plan and understand what your goals are.
In fact, my camel out there is suffering right now with a broken back.
So I actually found Pepe when it was only a couple of hours old, and I'm like, oh, this is a funny meme.
Oh my god.
Yo! Who is this degen?
The old man is swing trading over years at a time. And it's like, that's where the real money is made.
The answer is a permanent loss. With single-sided staking, you don't have to worry about impermanent loss.
If you're aware, if you're disciplined, you can hone that into further financial growth.
Financial freedom, to where you can actually live life and not have to be constantly living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, more or less, right?
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and gentlemen of all ages. We're back for another book club. It is Friday night after all, and we're here tonight to talk about, honestly, one of the foundational books for economic theory in the modern age. That is none other than The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. This book is kind of a twin with Hayek's economic twin, which is Robert Keynes. And he wrote the book, which is the definitive guide, the theory to government spending and maximum employment. I definitely butchered that title, but if this video goes well, hint, probably going to pick that one for my next book. But the point of this one is that it's a little bit of a part two of Uncle Z's quest against, or crusade against the socialists. So for everybody that caught the last one that I hosted, which was the Law by Friedrich Bastiat with our special guest Christian Hines, hopefully we're going to do our historian friend proud, and I will be trying to play that role tonight and provide extra context to everything going on, because as my co-host is about to tell you, this was a bit of a dense book. Speaking of which, Will, how's it going, brother?
Aloha, amigos, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, crypto degenerates, ducks and squirrels. This book is fucking dense, man. My God. I was like, it made me, not that I ever went to college or anything, but if I did, it would remind me of like going to an English class where you're sitting in the back row and they're talking about like, you know, lesson 107, and it's like, man, I haven't even learned lesson 101. I don't know what the hell's going on here. The bottom line up front of this book is socialism bad, and here is why. So I can agree to that sentiment. And other than that, like, getting through this book was a bit difficult. I had to go through some other like synopses of like The Road to Serfdom for Dummies, or like Milton Friedman's account on like talking about what the book is, and looking up the notes on the website that Zenith dropped into the Telegram. But yeah, man, it's a good book. A lot of good historical context for those of you who are history buffs dealing with World War II and knowing a lot of the stuff that was going on in Germany, Russia, and England at the time. So fantastic stuff. I'm excited to get into it. Let's hop on over and talk to the rest of the panel, see how they're doing, Mr. Zenith.
Let's do it indeed. Already, first up in the top left, we have Nate McGettit. How's it going, my man?
Oh, you know, just the usual. Every single day, we got more things popping up in the crypto world and all that. So just trying to navigate your way through, and yeah, having fun.
Absolutely.
Time. So, however, this book, yeah, pretty dense, but I believe it's covering an extremely important topic, something that people really truly do need to understand, you know. And we'll get more into that here later, but in truth and reality, it really did open my eyes, especially when it comes to like the economies and how the economies themselves. It's kind of like how they say the root of all evil is money, right? This book kind of gets in. I don't want to say gets into that, but it makes a good argument for that being true. How about that? We'll leave it there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move it on over to the other Stevenson that we have on the panel. Sam, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. Appreciate you all having me on here. It's good to be part of the show. I'm excited to talk about this book. It is a little bit heavier than I will normally do. I'm more of a self-improvement kind of guy and not worrying about improving my government because that's out of my hands. But I'm looking forward to getting into this discussion and looking forward to seeing where we're going to take it, how we're going to help our fellow watchers learn some great stuff. And with that said, Farmer J, Mr. Farmer J, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about yourself, fellas? I thought it was a pretty good book. Interesting read. The only thing is it's a bit long, so I usually like to go over the books twice, but I was only able to get through it once. I think I had I listened to the complete version, which goes over how they compile that book from I guess originally there was a different version for England, and they this particular version that I listened to was kind of compiled for more of the American version. But I found it a very interesting book, and I think it kind of stays on topic of what we've been covering lately, mostly the despise of government and whatnot. But yeah.
Fair enough. Alrighty, last but not least, we have Mrs. Producer herself, Mrs. McGettit. How's it going?
Hello, I missed my unmute button there. Sorry. I
All
am
good?
doing good. Unfortunately, I did not get to finish this book because I did not realize it was so long, and I have a tendency to do the books the day that we do the book club so that they're fresh in my mind. And I think I need to start at least checking them before doing that because this one I had too much going on. 11-hour book, even at double speed, and I struggle a little bit with double speed. I prefer like 1.5 to 1.75. So I did not get through the whole thing. However, I am also a little bit with Will in this anyways, where politics and history are not my thing. They're not my strong suits. So it was always going to be something that wasn't exactly going to be great for me. But we do have the summary pulled up. So, I'll be here to participate as much as I possibly can and mostly just listen to you guys. I know Mr. McGettit, this is totally his ballpark type of area. So he's going to have fun tonight.
Excellent. Well, this is going to be a good one. I know you gave a good illusion there, which is that this might sound like a political book, and fun fact, it kind of is. However, this is one of the books that really is a basis for libertarian philosophy. So inside of the crypto space, where we all operate ourselves, libertarian views of finance and money is very, very common and prolific. Heck, it's one of the foundational reasons behind Bitcoin, in fact. So the reason that I picked this book in particular is I think it's very important for economics, and unfortunately we do deal with the world of economics, mainly because we're kind of trading currencies to a degree. And by that, I mean that is exactly what we're doing. Sure, if you're talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's going to be a lot more tangible for the currency trading thing, but even when you start getting down into meme coins, lower cap coins and whatnot, and things that don't exactly have a whole ton of economic energy inside of them, understanding how the supply and demand curves of basic economics factor and how that plays into how price moves and how liquidity is effectively a supply curve for you. That kind of stuff is very, very important and foundational. So this is aimed to be a bit more of a, I know the book does not feel very 100 level of a college class, but as far as your crypto education goes, the concepts that are somewhat covered in here are very base in that regards. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about in this book are weaved through the sentiment and the philosophy through a lot of crypto founders and a lot of projects that go on. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's totally fair. That definitely, yeah, completely accurate. Sorry, I worded that a little funky, but no, I totally agree with that. You gotta I would say this type of concepts that you're describing there are completely foundational for anybody who's going to be, relying on crypto moving forward.
For sure. I'll try to correct me if this just sounds like word salad, but I'll try to specify this. This book is political in the sense that it talks about nation and government setup as opposed to modern day politics when we refer to things getting too political, which is more of populist appeals, aka trying to get certain politicians elected and what they're promising to give the people. It's kind of like the Batman movie with Jack Nicholson where he says, hubba, 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 I'm giving you out free money. Who do you trust? Me? Yeah, no, not that. Anyways, alrighty. With that being said, do we have any, I do want to go around the horn real quick. What was your guys' major takeaway from the book? Let's start off with my co-host, Will. What's your big takeaway on this one?
I liked, oh shoot, hang on. Let me pull up my notes now. It is my turn to do this. There was a quote in here that I quite liked, or it wasn't really a quote so much as it was a premise. Well-meaning people who wish to change the world for the better often bring out the exact opposite outcome. So basically, everybody wants to make the world a better place, and most often the people that make the world a worse place are those that try and force other people to do things in order to see their vision rather than giving them freedom of choice and things of that nature.
Fair enough. What's the quote, my friend? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, basically. So, but especially when applied to governing agencies and governing bodies, everyone had the finest of ideals in this book, and like like you can tell one of the things that was very important that stuck out to me is that like Fritz was he wrote this book addressed to socialists. Like he wrote this book with the intention of like, hey, I want socialists to read this because like you guys are good people, but it just like by your own standards you can't implement the thing that you want, because by implementing like these steps necessary to bring about this change, you're going to ruin the thing that you want to create. And so that was the thing that stuck out the most to me.
Hey, good takeaway. Nate, what you got?
For me, it was the economic level. Actually, that was the thing that really kind of opened my eyes, right? Because I always looked at like, you know, socialism and totalitarianism, fascism, right? Like on two opposite ends, which they are politically. But when you're looking at the economic side of things, technically speaking, it's all the same, right? And ultimately, what people are trying to do is they're trying to control the economy, and they're trying to control the state and the people, right? And it's just two completely different ways of actually doing it. And so when they started talking about that, I was like, oh, wow, okay, you're right. That is the same. It's just different ways of achieving the same goal, basically.
I like it. Fair enough. Sam, what you got, my man?
I would personally, like, I'm not a big, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a huge political talker, at least at this point in my life. I will get older and richer before I start dabbling into that. But I do have to say that I tend to have the approach, like there's a quote in here that I didn't quite agree with. Nothing makes conditions more unbearable than the knowledge that no effort of ours can change them. And I would say that's probably true on like a whole when you're talking about like groups of people. But I have the point of view that every single person has the means to change their own situation if they decide to act and change their situation. Most people don't. And so like, yeah, I wouldn't say, obviously, I don't have the power to like control the direction of the country, right? But I have the power to like keep my apartment clean and have neighbors that like me and like clean up the sidewalk in front of my street. Like I have that power. So that's sort of my take on it, but that's all I'd say about that, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this to the folks out there that are a little bit skeptical about the practical application of this book, is that I think this book is a good base of trying to understand where the philosophic arguments we make come from. So understanding your source so that you can A, reference it, and then B, just not be pulling stuff out of the ether, but understand where the arguments come from is going to be able to help you make better principled arguments in the future.
Yeah, that's an important point too. I mean, you just because, you know, maybe you don't quite understand what someone is talking about, or possibly you're thinking to yourself, well, how can I actually use this for my life? It's still important to understand it, you know, because that way, if an opportunity does ever arise that, you know, it's like, hey, I can actually take action here, you'll have that understanding, at least basic understanding, you know, and the more you understand, well, the better off you are.
For sure. It's designed to help build the tapestry upon which you can operate the rest of your life and try to figure out how to weave it together for yourself. Alrighty, Farmer Jay, what was your big takeaway, my man? You are muted, my friend.
Oh. Sorry. There we go.
You're good.
I was gonna say, I guess my biggest takeaway would be the illusion of this democratic socialism utopia that people think is achievable, but it's not. Like, no matter how great your idea is, it still takes people to implement that, and people are always flawed by nature. So you're never going to achieve this thing that you want to achieve, and your ideal utopia isn't the ideal utopia of somebody else. So you're always going to have that conflict. And to me, like, I see it nowadays where people think that everybody deserves everything for no work. And that's just not realistic. To me, I don't see that possibility ever happen. Like not everybody can be rich. Not everybody can be on top. There's always going to have to be always somebody that services, that provides services for others. Like, your food doesn't get to your house by mistake. Like, somebody does that. But this ideal that because we can engineer or have this idea, it can actually be implemented as flawed. And I think that's a lot of young people nowadays don't actually have a clue of what it takes for society to run.
All very good stuff. We're gonna talk about that, all those concepts, a lot later on as well. Alrighty, last but not least, Mrs. McGettit, what is your takeaway from the book?
Mine was actually the same as Farmers. That's the thing that stuck out to me most. That the illusion that we can have, you know, this ideal world, but that illusion is different for everybody, and how that factors into how we live our lives and how and why we clash, and like why wars happen and things like that. Farmer kind of already said everything that made me think of, but that was a big part for me too.
Yeah, it's a very deep book. Like, if you want to tear it apart, you can, like, chapter by chapter, and like, but yeah, it's like the ideas that people believe in is just, like I said, we can tear into the chapters in depth. Like, we can make whole shows just on individual chapters, but we'll just keep it quick.
Absolutely, I like it. So I guess I'll finish it off myself and say that my main takeaway from the book is that I think Hayek thinks about government and social structure the same way he thinks about free markets, which is that based on what he's talking about in the book, which is that free markets operate best when no single person is trying to control it, because markets are made of so many individual transactions and so many people trying to make economic decisions for themselves. The idea that any one person or a single group of people is able to make the best decisions for everybody is a bit delusional. And I think that he really carries that practical idea when it comes to governments. He does make some moral appeals with it, but he also says that when you look at the way that people run governments, if you start to believe that you can actually control everything from a single source and do good with it, you're ultimately going to leave out certain things. And ultimately it's also a self-defeating philosophy, which is that when you do fail, the only answer is to give it more power, in which case it's only going to fail more and harder in exponential ways until you eventually get to the point of like totalitarianism, because it just builds on itself. It's a snowball of the only way to fix the problem because they failed previously was to give them more control, but if they didn't fix it the first time, why would you give them more power? It's that kind of thing. So again, I think that kind of comes out when you get a little bit of the context behind the book, which is that this is written in 1940-ish, I want to say. So this is a little early part of World War II. And a lot of it is a bit of a rationalization of trying to understand why Germany went the route that it did, leading towards the National Socialist Party, aka the Nazis, and then Hitler taking over. Because at the time, a lot of the people are trying to argue that it's some sort of German culture, some sort of German heritage about the way that they operate their country that leads them towards this totalitarianist regime. But at the end of the day, what it really is just the follow through of a philosophy that could happen to any people. So that's tied all up nicely with a bow. He says, you can't control the markets, can't control the government too much. You can't control people's lives through government too much. If you do it, you're going to fail on some axes, and if you try harder, you're going to fail even harder. Alrighty, that's what I got.
And if you think government's the solution, go to the DMV.
I had a question on that, and I hope it's okay to ask questions since I'm not entirely
absolutely
privy to these things. Would a good example of what you just kind of described there be kind of what America's healthcare has been slowly turning into?
That is a complicated topic in and of itself, but can you specify your question a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. The idea that came into mind when you were describing it, I just thought about how I've heard, obviously there's always a bunch of viewpoints on this, but one argument that I've heard against how America handles its healthcare right now is that it's too regulated. There's too much of the government trying to dictate how it should happen and how it what the prices are and everything like that. So instead of it being more of an open market where these people get to like actually compete with each other price wise, there's too much control in there, and it's just turning everything into what we have now.
Yeah, so as far as this book and that situation goes, I would argue, it's pretty much the same argument, which is that Hayek is proposing the idea that if you try to plan the market, you're going to fail miserably. and you're going to end up creating perverse incentives. And then some people are going to be chosen winners by the centralized planning, and some people are going to be chosen losers by the centralized planning. When it comes to the healthcare stuff right now in the United States, when it comes to the fact that healthcare is highly, highly regulated by the U.S. government, so you kind of get this, you get a battle between people that want to have cheap, well, I'll put it this way, it's the triangle. It is, you can either have availability, affordability, or quality care. And it's that triangle. You can only really ever have two of those things in whatever the system that you're dealing with is. And by trying to operate the healthcare industry in the way that the United States has, we've gone to the point where becoming a doctor is highly regulated, highly difficult to do, and highly expensive, which makes it prohibitive, which means that the supply of doctors is down. Arguably, that's a good thing or a bad thing. But when it comes to the list of things that doctors can provide, it is all-encompassing. Versus if you had specific carve-outs for, like, I don't know, like combat medics that came back and were able to provide some basic medical practices, not do like open heart surgery, but just like give people stitches and stuff. That is one way to open it up to regulation. From regulation, excuse me. So if you want to move away from a free market system and towards a centralized system of healthcare, which in and of itself is a market, yeah, Hayek in the book is going to specifically talk about that, because it talks about how the centralized planning is going to fail in one regards, because the centralized planners are going to be unable to account for everything, and they're going to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. So that's where you see stuff like Canada, which is the healthcare system, which is that, yeah, sure, you can get the government healthcare to pay for your conditions and whatnot, but you might be on a waiting list for like 3 years. It's the time aspect of it.
You can get them to pay for it if you survive long enough to get the care at some points, but yeah, like you see affluent people in Canada don't get their healthcare in Canada. They come to the States because they understand what their system is. And it's for those that don't have private healthcare in America, right? The public healthcare system here is absolute shit. If you have private care, you can actually get good service. Like it does come at a cost, though. It comes at a premium that you're going to have to pay for, but you're not going to have to deal with the bureaucracy, because like you were talking about, that there's rarely anything that becomes less decentralized, right? Everything else, every system we have now becomes more centralized and more paperwork and more government bureaucracy. And that, like you said, that slows things down, right? When you have the case like you were talking about, if a medic's able to come here, he's able to just operate outside those boundaries and do things quickly and efficiently. And when we become more centralized, you take that away. More people, now you have to wait for regulation and paperwork and approvals. And by the time that happens, it's like, are you still alive?
Correct. That's one of the downsides of the centralized planning or the government control with regards to healthcare. When it comes to the book that we're talking about tonight, Hayek would definitely argue that a good example of the free market working, which is he's a massive proponent of the free market, which is that the market is going to operate efficiently. And if you have fair competition, you're going to end up with better products for more people, more widely available for a better price, because competition will ensure that the product is either better, it's cheaper, or you can get it either faster or in the best way available to you. So when you look at an example like laser eye surgery was one of the specific healthcare areas that was kind of deregulated and allowed the free market to operate within it. So what ended up happening is that the product and the quality of the eye surgery drastically increased because people were able to do it more, so they could get better at it quickly. And then also the technology also rapidly advanced as well. And instead of having the advance of technology make it more expensive, you had people competing for business. So they actually started to have competitive prices. So the cost, the quality of the product went up. The cost of the product also went down, and the availability of the product has also increased because people are able to compete for it. In the process, it did mean that there were some losers, which was that people who were not able to do it at a competitive rate or as good of a job, those people did end up going out of business. But as far as the market is concerned, as a consumer, you are able to get a better product for cheaper, more available. And that is exactly what Hayek is trying to highlight in the book when it comes to economic markets, which is that the less centralized planning you have, it allows more people to make more decisions and have more experience. so that in their local situation, they're going to find the best possible option, as opposed to someone very detached trying to find the best possible option for everybody and ultimately failing just due to the fact that they don't have the availability and the knowledge localized to the individuals receiving the care.
Yeah, that's the Beatrice example they were giving out there. Granny Beatrice, which I completely agree with, because if you're looking at that, man, it's like, seriously, if you're trying to sell ice in Arizona versus here in Minnesota in the middle of winter, where are you going to sell more ice?
Arizona, baby.
Arizona, right? But I mean, if you have a centralized government, like just saying, hey, you have to sell this ice for this particular price and everything, yeah, that's not going to work out too well. And you can't even run a company at that point, right? So yeah, it needs to be localized. Even if it was just like statewide, that would be a hell of a lot better than like the entire country of the United States, right? But yeah, unfortunately, the government tries to reach its tentacles in just a little too much.
Yeah, they try to have an approach of a one solution fits all kind of model, and it doesn't work.
Correct. Alrighty, Mrs. Producer, did that give you a sufficient answer to your question?
Yeah, that was great. That was everything I was wondering about. I was just trying to find examples that I can kind of connect for my own brain, if that makes sense.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense.
It's also auto insurance.
Real quick.
Auto insurance is another one.
Well, but yeah, when you start introducing the mandates, you start requiring people to do things, they're forced to do things, and then people are able to capitalize on it. We will cover more of that later in the stream, though. Right now, we do need to get to two major segments. First up is going to be what Will's going to help me out with, and then after that, I'm going to go through the book summary and a little bit of context. But first, ladies and gentlemen, Will, take it away.
It's time for chat shoutouts, motherfuckers. So get your chats in, and then we'll shout them out, because that's what we do here on the TGen Roundtable.
That is what we do, indeed. I wonder how many comments we have built up until this point. As always, though, we do have the number one DGen, a.k.a. the first person in here, none other than 54 Cent himself. We got What's Up DGens from Centurion 54X. Good to see you, sir. As always, glad to have you for another excellent stream coming up. And then outside of that, do we have anything else? Not really, actually. Shoot. What a show. I guess people are living their lives on a Friday night tonight. Oh, well.
Yeah, everybody's watching the Bitcoin conference.
Or that. Yeah, that's going to be a major topic for this Sunday's
summertime,
episode.
So people are out and about. The sun finally came out in Minnesota.
Who the hell touches grass? Are you kidding me? Everyone's on the computers. Come on.
True. Either way, if we reduce viewership because people are out touching grass and enjoying life, I will take it 100%. Also, if this book title scared everyone off, I also understand it. But nonetheless, I think it's important. So we're going to roll with it. That's what we got. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are 30 minutes into the stream, but let's talk about the book itself now. So this book, there you go. The book, Road to Serfdom, was written around 1940. This is a bit of a response to Robert Keynes when he wrote his book, which is a bit of a response to the Great Depression. So those are the forces that are going on with this book and why it's written. Keynes was specifically talking about how do we prevent the decade duality of the 20s, which was very decadent and very degenerate, some might people argue, with just the amount of spending, the lavishness, and then how do we compare that with the Dust Bowl, aka the Great Depression that followed it immediately after. He's like, both of those scenarios are not super great, so how do we find the middle part? And his proposition was government spending in kind of the opposite direction, which is that when you have really good times, tax heavily and reduce government spending, so you're reducing demand and you're also increasing the amount of money pulled out of the system to fight inflation. And then the other half of that is if you're in a recession, the government has to spend because it has the unique ability to run up a deficit and then also do so through political decree effectively. And then at the same time, reduce taxes to incentivize spending, aka increase demand. So that's the basic Keynes idea. Hayek wrote this book as a response to the socialists and people trying to call for more centralized control of the government to prevent catastrophe. His main argument here is that centralized control is not going to work. A more socialist utopia is never going to happen. And if you do this, you're going to end up with nothing that you asked for and instead just authority. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning that also part of the reason why this was written is trying to understand why Germany went the route that it did between the end of World War I through the actions taken in World War II when this was written. Very early, not super late World War II, 1940s. So that is what we got there. The book breaks down into 5 major points. First off, he says the illusion of democratic socialism. We already talked about that a little bit. We'll get into it more later. Centralized planning is not inevitable, even as technology progresses and the economy gets more complex and specialized. Centralization is not necessarily the answer, or is it even good? After that, we have problems with economic controls. And then we have when the people that try to get on top of political systems end up kind of being the worst people. And then outside of that, he does have a final section that talks about international relations and how that's really just a larger, more expanded view of an internal national debate going on. So the idea that pretty much whatever is going on inside of a country, if you try to expand that to a global thing, you're just going to end up with similar things if you try to go down the centralized government and marketing stuff as well. So that is what I got. Folks, anything that I missed?
I think you covered it pretty good.
Blank stares, baby. Blank stares. Alrighty, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the idea that Hayek was trying to tell the socialists, I understand you have a good idea, or you think you have a good idea, but let's go a few steps down the road and explore why it's not a good idea. So I got a few quotes here for you. First off, Hayek talks about how the democratic socialism, aka the great utopia of the last generations, is not only unachievable, but to strive for it produces something utterly different that few of those now wish it would be prepared to accept consequences. Many will not believe till the connection has been laid bare in all aspects. Wow, the audiobook made that sound so much better than when I rewrote it. Okay. That right there is a great example of one of the barriers to entry for this book.
Hey!
So this is exactly what Will was talking about earlier. I will try to find one of my other quotes. This talks about how democracy is essentially a utilitarian device for safeguarding internal peace and individual freedoms. And due to that, democracy seeks equality and liberty. Socialism seeks equality through restraint and servitude. It's pretty much the idea that when you have a more democratic or free society, people are willing to pursue the things that they want. But when you go the opposite direction, instead of producing more freedom in this regards, what you're actually doing is producing more guardrails, more boundaries, and more people making decisions for other people. So I want to toss it over to Farmer Jay. This was one of the sections that you liked about the book. Is there anything that I'm missing on this argument here? There you go.
I don't believe so. I think like you're right on point that whenever government tries to do something, which you got to remember, government is nothing but people that are running it. You just make everything freaking worse. Every time the government tries to streamline anything, all it does, it creates red tape and bureaucracy that is unnecessary. Instead of actually leaving it to the people that know what they're doing, you put it to bureaucrats that have no idea what the hell they're doing. The only thing they know how to do is push pencils and paper, and they have no clue on how to help anybody or do anything that's actually useful. But they have this notion that what they're doing is important because they're behind the desk and they're given a title. They actually don't know how to problem solve or how to deviate. Like if there's a certain standard of rules that is written, right? But if you're looking at the situation and you understand that that's not going to work, they don't have the option to go outside of that. Like this doesn't work. Let's do this. Let's streamline let's streamline the process. They don't. They go strictly by what somebody else wrote that has never dealt with the situation and tries to do it. I think probably Will can speak to this, that he was a Marine, right?
Yep.
When they're out in the field, right? When you're out with your squad, right? The squad leader is given some sort of he has the ability to make decisions on the field. Am I correct or not? Right? Given on the situation and things that present themselves, right? It's not you're not just going to go by. There's a certain things you want to follow in standards, but sometimes like the situation isn't on the book, and you have to make that call while you're there.
See, that's kind of the idea of democracy, right? Out here in the United States, the idea is just let the individual do what the individual is going to do. Ultimately, when you're looking at different forms of government, that is the highest and most efficient thing you can do. Unfortunately, like on paper, right? If you do look at, say, socialism, right? Yeah, it would work for sure. But the problem is that humans are human. And Will, I was talking to you about this in the green room here about, I mean, what happens, like in the book, they describe like what would happen if you bring a guy in for an interview and be like, hey, yeah, basically you're going to be in charge of everything. You get to dictate everything. That person is going to be very excited to get that job, and then they are going to continue to abuse that power. That is a guarantee. The reason being is that we humans, we have become the apex creatures on this planet because of competition and enabled to become the best one, right? There's always good things for yourself. And so that competition is always going to be there. We're always going to want to try and take as much as we can, and then we're going to serve ourselves. That's ultimately what we do. See, that's the reason why on paper, okay, socialism works. But in reality, because we're human, it doesn't work. Okay? So the idea instead is work with the way humans behave, right? Work with humans rather than against them, because the idea of socialism working against, but the idea of like say freedom and kind of the way like the United States does it is individualism. That right there is going to work because that causes people to want to go create new things and then want to go invent new stuff and create better economies and all that. That's the idea there. And there's the second thing, Farmer Jay, I think you're looking at this kind of like an incompetence level of like, hey, if we have a bunch of incompetent people in the government's going to be incompetent, right? But if we had a bunch of competent people in right, then the government would be competent. And so when it just doesn't work, again, we got to go back to the whole idea of like power, right? And like, hey, let's just get a bunch of friends who are going to help build me up. I can help build them up and we can take all the power for ourselves. That's going to be the incompetent people, right? Versus the competent people is like, will you do the job good? Right? And the idea originally was, hey, for the people, let's vote on these guys, okay? But even that quickly turned into what has always happened historically throughout humankind. So I think that's what's going on with what you're talking about there, Jay.
Yeah, the problem with that is that for some reason, the most incompetent of people are always find themselves in the position to make decisions. Let's look at Kamala Harris and the border, right? Completely does not know what she's doing, but yet she's put into the position of power, right? Like we see this time and time again. If you look at any of the Latin American countries and you talk to any of the people that ran away from their socialist or communist countries, they tell you that they used to live in a beautiful country until they themselves voted that in, and in turn, it turned their country to shit. Let's look at the most recent example is Venezuela. Like you have people that were doctors that are now they're not doctors anymore. They used to be doctors in their country, or you had professionals, and if you're a man, you had the option to come here and you work for certain things, and then you have women that were professional, and all they can do now is sell their bodies because like they absolutely destroyed their country. Because I don't like people still haven't showed me one country where socialism or community truly works. It doesn't, because you put people that are extremely incompetent in position of power, and it's completely sad what they do to their society and how they wreck it. And like that's the way I see kind of this country going. It's like this country was the greatest country in the world, and people built these things on these foundations where it was built on individualism and people taking accountability for their own actions and actually being able to build a life based on what you're able to do by yourself, like how much work you're able to put in. And now all I see is people that want to be lazy and whiners complain that why don't I have the same outcome as this person? Because you didn't put in the work. That's why. And now you want to sit here and you want to take things from other people that you haven't earned and say we should spread it out and we should all be equal. And I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think you guys are both right, and I think you're both tying in on one half of the equation that Hayek was talking about in the book, which is that when it comes to the competition, that's part of it, but also the incompetence is the other half of it, which is that because we have human competition, people do believe that there is the bigger fish out there, which means that if I'm not succeeding, it means that probably someone else out there is finding a way to succeed. So that someone else probably is better at this than I am. But then it also goes back to the other half, which is that if you try to find those people and try to get them elected for some sort of like centralized government or some sort of centralized control thing, ultimately you're going to end up with one of two situations, which is that either the incentive to be in that spot is so great that it starts to outweigh the rest of economic activity, or it's not great enough, in which case you're not actually going to attract the people that actually know how to succeed and prevail in these certain things and actually accomplish the things you're trying to delegate to be accomplished, which is that, okay, we realize that this market's not working. We want to try to get someone who's going to go make the market work, and we're going to give them all the power to do it. Okay, you're either going to pay them so much that you now are going to go get the best person for it, but now you've kind of wrecked the market because the incentive structure is disaligned. Or B, you're going to not incentivize them enough, in which case you're going to get someone who purports to be an expert, but is going to end up in the same position of incompetence, which is they don't actually know how to do it. So it's the combination of both. It's saying that we want someone to be better, but we don't know how to find the right person to do it, nor do we know how to incentivize them properly without destroying the whole free market as a whole.
I think at the moment we have like a current example. There's some guy that's running for president that seems to be mostly competent at what he does, and there's other individuals that aren't. And the individual that's actually competent, they take shots at his head because he's not willing to play ball, and he actually wants to change he wants to streamline things, but that doesn't. Some people don't want to do that, right? They like the status quo mainly because they're in the position now that they're entrenched in the government where they highly benefit of a government that's not highly efficient. They're the benefits of that. Like, let's take in California, the homeless problem. There's not an incentive to solve that problem. Why would the people that take millions of dollars a year to solve this problem, why would they be interested in solving this problem? Once you solve the problem, the millions of dollars stop coming in. There's absolutely no incentive for you to actually solve the problem. All you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot. But like I said, you have people that are put in position that have self-interest instead of actually people that are competent and actually want to provide a solution. It seems to be like we're in a messed up system at the moment where the people that are competent, nobody wants to listen to them. And all we want to do is put people into position that speak nice, or they tell you they want to solve solutions and they're going to do this, but in the reality all they do is cash their paycheck and do shit squat.
You know, in World War II, that's that. What, do you want to talk? Jesus. All right. In World War II, that was actually something that Hitler actually ended up running into. It was that issue where the majority of his generals started doing really bad. And it's because they weren't trying to do the best job they could. It was literally because they're just shutting up and wanting to keep their position. So things can go south very quickly.
Exactly. I think you guys are tying it. You're really honing in on the idea of are you getting paid to actually end up at the solution and having the problem gone, or are you just getting paid to work on it? And as long as you can keep those billable hours going, what's the reason to actually finish the job?
Yep.
There isn't an incentive for that person, like individually. And that's where I say that, like, even though we try to put people in positions of power to solve problems, when solving the problem is against their own benefit, are they going to do it, or are they going to do it are they just going to be self-serving and do what it takes for them to keep living the current lifestyle they live? Like, most of them, because if they're shady as hell, which some reason, like I said, most people that work in the government just end up being shady and incompetent. I don't know if it attracts that, or because I have no idea why they end up there. But to me, it seems like that's usually the people that end up in these positions. And like, if they have no incentive to solve the problem, and they understand that if they just solve the problem halfway, they can keep collecting a paycheck and live high off the hog, then they're probably going to do that.
That's fair. I think, yeah, I think we're really tying into the incentives idea here, which is that people are going to do what they're incentivized to do. If the incentive is to prolong something so that you can keep making money off of it, you're going to do such. And that, unfortunately, it operates off the idea that there's, especially when it comes to the government providing the incentive, it is no longer a free market doing something, but rather the single authority of force in a nation is the one incentivizing something. So you're not going to get the most efficient thing. You're going to get whatever is chosen as the thing to be done.
Yeah, I think like you said, incentive, right? Like in the free markets and private industry, whenever you're able to provide a solution like that, like if you provide that solution and you solve it, there's usually a big bonus attached to it, and that there doesn't seem to be that mechanism in the government. It's like, this is what it is, and as soon as we're done, you're done with it. But in the free market, it's like, if you're able to come up with a solution, you're probably going to be compensated for that solution way above what you were being provided with now. And in the government, it's just a nice steady trickle, a flow of money, that as long as this problem persists, the money's just going to keep coming in. So let's just keep the racket going.
For sure. So speaking of money, I want to keep the conversation going on to the next point, which is, I think Hayek tries to address the socialists and really make the plea to them, which is that I hear you and I understand why you're asking the question that you're asking for, which is, why do we not give more power to a centralized authority and try to redistribute all this wealth? And I think one of the reasons that he identifies in the book is that due to the Industrial Revolution, the world came into the Industrial Revolution was a very large increase in personal wealth among the average person in the world, especially in the industrialized world, which is that people suddenly had their financial situation a lot more solved than the rest of society and government coming along with it, which is that people were suddenly flushed with more cash or the opportunity to at least gain more money. So that led them to the issue of, we have the money situation solved, but we don't have the inequality situation solved, or we don't have the answer of control solved. And that is why in the book he talks about the idea that they make this plea, but then the plea is also made under the idea that these governments are supposed to provide for the general welfare. But it's like, okay, we have tons of money floating around. Why can't we just solve all the general welfare problems immediately? And I think this comes to the definition of freedom for these people, which is that they define it differently. Because they are now free of some of the economic things, they start turning towards all the other woes and ills of society, in which case they believe that, all right, it clearly must be the government because the markets haven't solved this, therefore we need something else to solve this.
First world problems.
It is a little bit of the first world problems issue. But I think that Hayek was pointing out in the book that if you believe these are first world problems issues and you start delegating that authority, you're going to start running into some third world problems real soon, which is that, oh no, we stopped incentivizing people to make the food, and now everyone just wants to eat the food instead of make it. So now there's no food.
Not enough farmers.
Yeah,
People
I
vote
think
themselves
I'm pretty sure you
circuses.
guys are familiar with like Tim Pool, right? I think he had like a quick segment that I watched a few months ago where there was this person that didn't understand it, how the milk actually gets to the store. Like they literally think that you can just go to the store and it should just magically be there. Like, no, like it comes from a freaking farm.
Yeah,
Like,
farmer.
It's
quick.
just crazy to me.
Agreed. Have you seen the one where this lady called into like the local highway patrol and she's complaining that they had a deer crossing sign in the middle of the highway and she's like, why don't you make them cross somewhere else? This is really dangerous. I think that's pretty similar to what you're describing right there.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Or the one girl that didn't understand that the fruit tree she had in the back of her house, she could literally just pick the lemons and cut them and use them. Like they don't get how the real world works, and it's crazy. Like, how do you not know that fruit comes from a fruit tree? Like, you can literally just plant a tree and you can get the fruit, and they just think that everything magically appears at the Whole Foods. It's crazy. Like, people have no idea. They live like in Lala world, and then these are the same people that are put in charge of the government and want to tell you how to live your life, and that's just freaking frustrating, and it makes me crazy.
I hear you. Although I would argue that I think this is the outgrowth of specialization, and it's what happens when the economy gets so far into the route that it gets, which is that you're able to produce more when people are specialized, as opposed to everyone trying to do everything all at the same time and just duplicating efforts. We've gotten to the point where the specialization has gotten very, very specific, which is that people might not know much outside of their source, which is why you get the example with the girl who doesn't understand that the lemon tree in the backyard is the same thing that makes the lemons that you go buy in the store.
Yeah, like I think the story on that one was she literally went to buy lemons, and her friends asking her, "Why did you go buy lemons? You have a lemon tree in your backyard with lemons." She didn't understand the concept, but you just pick the lemons, you wash them, and you cut them, and that's what you're buying at the market. Like she thought that these lemons, like I don't know what the hell she thought, to be honest with you. Like it just boggles the mind. Like, do you not understand that it comes from a tree? I don't know. To me, it's just frustrating. Like, and these are
The
the people
ledger.
and these are the
The
people
ledger
that tell
has to go ahead. Please.
no, I was just gonna say these are the people that tell you they want to tell you how to live your life.
The ledger's got a balance. There's like if a country has too many people in positions of authority and they are whimsically flapping their authority about, changing the world, making decisions, implementing, plans and goals and acts of will and all sorts of these things, and they have no consequence or understanding of the consequence for their actions. Like one of the things that we muse about here on the DGen Roundtable from time to time is like it's important to be a sovereign individual, and it's important to surround yourself with people that are knowledgeable and high, like achievers and ambitious and things. And one of the problems in the United States and in Western countries in particular that use forms of democracy and things like that is there's been a bastardization of the idea that anybody can vote, anybody can throw about authority willy-nilly. There's no cost to making like important and powerful decisions. We can just write some things down on a ballot, and we can all just have a happy, carefree, go lucky world. One of the things that I would encourage folks at home to think about is like, what is the place that you're living doing to make your world better and to make your world worse? Where are you at in the States? Where are you at in the city that you live in, your school district? What's going on around you? If you're like, one of the things that Paul Sachs was joking about earlier in the comments is like, hey, let's vote Kamala to be governor of California, right? Like, it's funny, but it's like like people will bring about good and bad decisions, and they don't necessarily all suffer the consequences or all learn from it or necessarily make good decisions. So the thing that I want to drive home is I want people to understand that if you're making decisions that are powerful, then there is like both positive and negative fallout from that. And so think carefully the things that you do. Engage in high leverage activities like what Sam was saying earlier, like focus on the things that you can do to make the world a better place, and surround yourself and go to places where there's other people that are also trying to be ambitious and not act foolishly like all these people that we're talking about. That's my little TED talk, my little spiel, my little rant. I kind of wanted to bring it back to the like, what can we do as listeners to the show and people that are understanding this book by Fritz Hayek, and that's where I wanted to take the conversation.
And I guess
to come back
to, I was just gonna say it's a very deep book, right? Like you can go into like certain topics forever.
I'll give you guys some actionable advice that Brandon, who's just recently on the DGen Roundtable, right? And I tweeted out what it is that he was talking about, something actionable that you can do, because people oftentimes kind of despair a little bit and thinking, oh, there's nothing that I personally can do, no action that I can take to help change the government, blah, blah, blah. And it's like all hopeless. Well, there is something that you can do, right? And what you need to do is you need to identify people who are in a position to possibly try and change some stuff, or at least push things the right direction, at least what you consider is the right direction. And that's how Germany ended up getting Hitler, quite frankly. It's because they were in such a desperate place. After World War I, they were absolutely ruined financially. Like the economics was trying to remember what their dollar at the time was called, the franc, I believe it was called, and it absolutely just plummeted, and everybody was living in absolute horrific poverty. And then you get this individual who it looked like he wanted to do the right thing and put Germany back on the map, and everybody said yes, let's do that. And then next thing we know, we have Nazis, right? Now that was sad, and those are individuals who are in desperate situations. But what you need to do as a person, right, is try to identify, number one, where you do want your country to go, but then number two, who you can vote for will help push it that direction. That is actionable advice that you personally can do. And so, like, Farmer Jay, when you're sitting here saying, oh, everybody in the government's incompetent, okay, cool, there's nothing you can do to change that. But what I want you to do is I want you to go try and find someone who is competent and start trying to push for them to get in. And if they can get in, if you can help with that in some sort of way, get other people on board, then you've done your part.
I live in the state that elected Headboard Harris. I have no hope for the state.
Well,
That's
then you can
definitely
go
a
ahead
nickname.
and leave the state and go to a state that treats you better.
The funny thing about this state is the amount of people that are conservative in the state of California. It's crazy. It's just that the other number, it's even bigger. So there's a lot of people that have the same kind of thoughts as I do. It's just when 55% of the population sees it the other way, like, you're always going to get outvoted. But there's plenty of people that have the same train of thought that I do, or believe in individualism and self-sovereignty. But unfortunately, you have a large portion of people that don't see it that way. They think that government is their solution, and they don't get it that the government is the government caused the problem that they're seeking a solution to.
To add on to what you guys are talking about there, to Nate, your point, when it comes to the actual actionable items, there's something in this book and also something in The Law by Bastiat that they talk about, which is that one of the fallacies of the socialists is believing that the people of elected government or whatever are made of a finer clay, or that they're a cut above the rest, so to speak. But it's the fallacy, and they point out that, like, no, they are of the general population and have been elected by the general population, which means that theoretically, many people have a lot of the similar capabilities. I'm not going to say the exact same, but as far as capacity goes, is that theoretically everyone has the capacity to be experts in their field, especially if they spend time working at their craft, which means that at the same time, if you take the time to understand arguments and understand what is going on, you can see beyond the greater effect, which is that you have the ability to operate beyond your immediate needs, which is that as long as you're fed and you have a shelter and that you're not in imminent danger, that in and of itself is going to allow you to really use that prefrontal cortex and start thinking about things, which means that you should be able to understand when the people are trying to lie to you and when they're not, and understand that you have the ability to understand what is good for you beyond immediate effect. And I think that that's what the book kind of talks about when it comes to the arguments against the socialism thing, which is that it really is a plea to, I have a problem, why can't someone else just take care of this for me? And it's like, well, if you weren't able to take care of the problem, what makes you think that someone else is magically going to be able to take care of the problem if you just delegate your authority and responsibility to them? But because you have the same capacity as everyone else, the good news is you have the ability to fix problems yourself. And then also when it comes to actionable items at a local level, sure, you might not be able to affect federal policy, but you know what you can affect? School board, town mayor, people in the local legislation where you're going to have a greater impact on your life. When you kind of get down the road of serfdom and you start trying to delegate authority, you get farther and farther away from your actionable control. So try not to give your authority away. Try to take as much control of your own life as you possibly can.
That's something that Todd Pop talks about all the time. Is he's always saying, hey, you need to get involved in local politics. You need to be a part of that, because that is where the true change comes from. It starts from the bottom up. You can't you're not going to vote for president, all of a sudden everything is going to be right in the world and fixed. That's just not how it's going to happen. Things can get better, sure, maybe, but the only way things can actually change is if, exactly as you said right there, Zenith, you go to the state or local levels and start voting in people as simple as a school, a superintendent. Like, that's something as simple as that. That's where true change actually happens.
True. Fair enough. All right, gang. Are we ready to move on to another topic, or is there anything else we want to cover here?
No, just going based on what Nate said. Like, anybody that looks to any president that gets elected and you think that they're gonna change your life, you're a dumbass. All you can do is, whoever gets elected, you can look at what their policies are and move according to what's in your best interest. But if you think anybody's gonna get elected and they're just gonna magically wave a wand and solve your problems, like, you're smoking more crack than Hunter Biden.
Really on that Parmesan, you know what I'm saying?
You know, sprinkle it on top.
True. Alrighty, gang. I have a question that I think is highly relatable to the crypto gang here, which is that in the book, one of the things that Hayek is talking about, and one of the things that his opponents suggest, is that due to improvements in technologies, centralization is not only a good thing, but inevitable. We operate in a nice little space that we call decentralized finance and decentralized technologies. Do you think that the advancement of technology, who do you think it proved right? Do you think it proved right Hayek, that technology does not immediately lead to centralization? Or are people saying that more technology will lead to centralization?
You want to take this first, Farmer J?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I believe that technology does lead to more centralization. Like, if you look at the amount of spying that the government has on us nowadays, the amount of access they have to our thoughts, what we believe in, what we're watching. Like, if you engage in certain conversations in certain groups, you're labeled something, right? We're probably all on some sort of list of whether you're like red pill or you speak like you're classified as something else, right? And now the government has the ability to do that more efficiently because of technology. You can be identified in public with cameras. Like, the world's becoming more centralized, and I think that it makes it easier on the governments, but it's also up to the people to fight against that. Like, we should say that there should be limits to these things. Like, you shouldn't use this technology to spy on your citizens and label them certain things. But I think until people actually stand up and say, no, we don't want this, there's not going to be a change.
That's fair, but I'll give you some pushback. Is it that the technology itself and the advancement and the availability of the technology led to the situation you're describing? Or is that more of a governmental issue, which is that people did not stop the government from doing something, or they explicitly just gave it the power to do so through, like, the Patriot Act, for example?
Yeah, no, I think that technology made it easier for the government to do what they were already wanting to do. It's like you said, like when they passed the Patriot Act, right? The amount of powers that it gave them under the guise of this, the name itself, the Patriot Act, right? But everything in that bill goes against the beliefs of what this nation was founded on, right? The people are allowed to privacy, and the government shouldn't spy on you and intrude into your personal life. But that's exactly what that allowed. Like, they literally are able to spy on you. What is it, when Snowden freaking uncovered all of that? The government went after him because he basically told us, hey, the government's spying on you. And they went full force on him. So it's just, the technology enables the behavior. It makes it easier for them. But it's not the technology itself that's at the root of the problem. It's the government and the people that are in the government themselves that think that they're entitled to your thoughts, your private thoughts, and what you think, that they should have a list on, if people think this certain way, we should group you over here. And like, to me, the government doesn't have that right. Like, you don't have the right to intrude into our private lives. Like, go fuck off.
Well put.
I hear you, but at the end of the day, I still want to ask the question, though. Is that a result of government outreach, or is that a result of increase in technology? You made the point that it's definitely easier to do it now. But at the same time, the other half of that is that because the technology is available, is it easier to fight it as well?
Yes. Okay. Do you mind if I take this?
Yeah,
If
go
you
for
know,
it.
If you know how to fight it, yeah.
There you go. There
See,
you go.
that's the thing right there. All right. So originally, right, we came out of this place of World War II, right? And everybody, you know, was like, okay, we need to be protected. It's good if the government, you know, has control in these institutions have control, because we need very large swinging you know, hammers. Really, we need guns, right? We need to be protected from that. That was the thought processes. And so people wanted this technology to watch them. Ultimately, they wanted the governments to have that power. But as the generations have kind of gone on now, and the more and more we're looking at these things that the government's doing in secret behind our backs, the more and more we started thinking to ourselves, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. And this is that whole cycle that we were talking about with the 4-generational cycle, every 100 years, where, you know, you got like a crisis. You have a crisis generation that, you know, goes through something traumatic and horrible, and so then they're like, hey, we need help. And then, you know, you can that's when them and the next generation after that are just fine and okay, and with a large government like handling everything. But then after that, there's so much peace in the world that now creativity and individualism becomes a thing where you don't need as much protection and all of that. And so if you look at back in World War II, that's where we were. That's where we were at. And I'm forgetting his name. If you could remind me real quick. The creator of the book, Hayek. What Hayek was talking about, and the point he was trying to make, is that, hey, this is going to go away eventually, and you don't want to have this set in stone for when it does need to change eventually. That's what I was getting out of it. And we're at that point now where it's like, yes, the technology has advanced to the point where we are locked down. We are in our own prison cells in the middle of a of a country, right? But with that being said, technology has advanced to the point where we can fight back, though, too. We have our own fighting chance. And so now when you go ahead and look at crypto, right? Crypto is something that, I mean, let's just start with Bitcoin, the blockchain, right? Blockchain is completely open. You can see everything going on in there. Dang, it's almost like the government would really not like that, because that's way too much secret stuff that would be exposed. Okay. So now we're starting to get that pullback of like, hey, you know, we need less government, and we need to have more honesty ultimately. And that's kind of the scary thing. It's not even that people are fighting the governments for less control, as much as they just want to know more about what's going on. Really, it's not even.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yep. And so this is the argument that I made, though, right? The technology, because we've created these ways where it's either for governments, it's either get the guns out and be extremely tyrannical, or it's take over that technology and play ball. Basically, it's either or. The people who are trying to be more free are ultimately going to be creating more and more and more, faster and faster and faster technologies that are going to fight these governments that are trying to maintain the control they once had back in the old days. This is how the cycle comes back around to a crisis, because there needs to be a reset of the social structure. And that's kind of what ended up happening in Germany. However, World War I and World War II was a hell of a chain there, when you also look into just all of the economic depressions in between all that time and everything as well around the world.
Sure, I think you guys split the baby again on this one, which is, I think you each honed in on a different part of it. Yeah. Jay, I got a quote here for you that I think is right up the alley of what you were talking about. Hayek says, quote, "Well, there is nothing in modern technological developments which force us towards comprehensive economic planning. There's a great deal in those technological advancements which make them infinitely more dangerous in the hands and the power of a planning authority that they would now possess." What he's saying is that the technology is not making you go towards centralized planning, but if centralized planning gets a hold of the technology, it makes them more lethal. But at the same time, I think you would also agree with Nate on this one, which is that just because the the ability and the capability and the lethality, so to speak, of these technologies. Just because the government is all those more things with more technology, the good news is that the citizenry is also all of those things with the technology as well, which is that it doesn't, technological progress does not point towards economic planning by a centralized figure or decentralization. But what it does is it raises the capability of everybody involved, which kind of makes it more consequential. So
yeah,
I do want to see if we can get a few more voices in here. Do you
I
guys
was
think
just
that
gonna
Hayek
say-
was proof?
I was just gonna say quickly, yeah, like what you were saying, Zenith, that it made the ability to gather information easier. But were they already doing that before that? The answer is yes. It wasn't the technology. The technology just made it a lot easier to gather all that information and centralize it into a database. Where before everything was paper, now everything is digital. So it makes it like they can streamline the amount of information they collect on the citizens.
For sure, I hear you.
That being said,
you have
though,
a little
there's
bit
a
of
lot more people though too.
That's true. That's true. It's more people, which is harder to collect, but the ability to collect is also increased. I will ask you guys this though: which of the crypto projects does the government specifically hate the most?
I can tell you right now which one.
Go for it.
Tornado.
There it is. The mixers.
I was going to say Monero as well, but yes.
It's all the mixers. It's all the security stuff. It's because the increase in technology has given you the ability to kind of like obfuscate your transactions and be able to hide and have that privacy back. That is the thing that they hate the most, because it is you using the technology against them, which they do not like.
And it's funny,
the government,
right?
like, they see it as like, hey, I've got this delicious sandwich on my plate, and my delicious sandwich is everything that everyone else wants and has. And then people like you imagine the people as like a little trail of ants, like wandering up and starting to take little bits of the sandwich away, and they're taking it back to their nest and like, yes, this is ours. And they're taking the ants own the sandwich or something. And then the government's like, oh, fuck no. And it starts like smashing down on these little ants crawling up on the plate and everything.
That's right. It
They're
makes
not
you
happy.
feel like the ants ruin the whole sandwich for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny because the government has been laundering money through special budgets and black ops things forever, right? But as soon as normal citizens, even if you just send the money from one of your wallets to another, you're not trying to engage in any illegal activity, right? You just don't want to tracked. They consider that you're a horrible, evil human being. That right is strictly reserved for us. But if you do it, we're gonna lock your ass up and throw away the key.
Correct. You're right on the money there, which is they hate the fact that you have the ability to do it now. And they say, whoa, it was cool when we did it, not you.
Yeah, whenever they do like what was it? The Pentagon can account for how many trillions of dollars?
Oh God!
It was like 2.4 trillion, I think. When it's crazy too, because there's like probably shouldn't go down that rabbit hole.
Tornado Cash. Let you put $50 through Tornado Cash, and all of a sudden the full force of the government's coming down on you. But you can't account for $2.8 billion trillion. That's a crazy amount of money.
Well, listen here, Farmer. They're not accountable to us. We are accountable to them. And so that's why it's the way that it is.
Bullshit. That's why I tell people I love that movie V for Vendetta.
Yep, that's
the
a good movie.
government should fear their people, not the other way around.
That's why we need to keep the guns, the high-powered guns.
I own nothing.
I will say that there is of those two groups, the people and the government, one of them is significantly much more capable of violence than the other. Something for the folks at home to think about.
This is true. I'm gonna reel us back into the central premise here, though, and I want to perform it in a question to you guys, which is that the book was written in 1940. They didn't have computers. They definitely didn't have the internet, and they absolutely did not have cryptocurrency. So when we're looking at if we brought Hayek to today after reading this book, who do you think he would say is winning the battle for technology? Do you think that technology has led more towards centralized planning, or that technology has given people the ability to fight centralized planning?
It's probably both. Go ahead, Mrs. McGettit. You've been quiet for a while.
You can go first, Bill.
I was just gonna.
Anyway, it's fine.
my quick thought is that I
Go,
think that
Will.
it's probably both. I think that it's going to lean more towards the side of the government is using technology, like Zenith had said earlier. It's basically just a leverage maximizer, right? And the government uses and maximizes more levers than the average person. Now, I will say that, like, if you're a sovereign individual that's looking to chase your own leverage maximization, then you're living in the best time possible, right? But as far like I suppose it depends on how you measure it. Do you measure it from an individualistic point of view, or do you measure it from a like this is something that the government can do to fuck everything up point of view? You know, if you measure it from like some total amount of leverage as an individual, then yeah, it's a great time. If you measure it as like what can the government do to ruin someone's life, then it's like, oh well, you know, it depends on how you look at it. So go ahead, Mrs. McGettit, whatever you had.
All right. I wanted to say, I'm actually kind of on the opposite spectrum for this question. I am of the opinion that if we didn't have the internet, if we didn't have the technology that we do today, we would probably be pretty much doomed. The fact that something like Bitcoin and crypto is able to exist and is able to be something that competes with the American dollar is kind of our saving grace at this point. If we didn't have those capabilities and the idea to have a decentralized currency in general, I think we'd be completely under the thumb of our government at this point. There would be no way to fight back. There would be no way to even really know that we're being as controlled as the world is getting to be. Another thing that comes to mind is the idea of something like the dark web. The fact that that exists, that the government can't shut that down and completely just take that away from people, that they can't hide that it is accessible, that all these things are out there at all, is a win for the common man. And I'm not saying like, oh, the dark web is a win. I know a lot of, according to rumors anyways, a lot of crazy things go on there. But that's kind of where I'm at. I think that without the technology that we have today, we wouldn't really even stand a chance of fighting back. And even with what we do have, it's still going to be a very hard battle.
Fair enough. Tell you what, Mrs. McGettit, I have a question for you. So I want to ask, when do you think this book sold best? Do you think that this book sold best when it was released in 1940-ish? Do you think it sold best when Hayek won a Nobel Memorial Prize in economics in 1974, and then also was referenced by Margaret Thatcher in Britain in 75, or at a different economic turmoil event in more modern day? Which one do you think?
Oh God, that's a trap question. I have no idea. I'm gonna go with 1980. Give it a rough 3-4 years after he got that Nobel Prize. No, what did you say he got? What prize?
I think it's the Nobel Memorial Prize in economics. Although I'm pretty sure it's just the Nobel Peace Prize. But
okay, yeah, I'm gonna take a wild shot in the dark and say like the 1980s, early 1980s.
Well, I tricked you there because he actually sold the best during the 2008 housing crisis in the United States, when people were trying to reconcile with the idea of, oh gosh, all these government loans were so terrible. I wonder if anybody wrote about this at some point. It's like, oh yeah, he did.
Oh, that's
that makes
perfect
sense.
example, right, of what this book talks about. Like like all these loans were issued because the government stepped in and said, hey, everybody should be allowed to own a home. And what happened?
Ninja loans, baby.
People got freaking wrecked. All because
the market had to correct, and that's what wrecked the people.
Yeah, but the market was in such a bad position because people were over here overextending themselves, and all they needed was they basically over leveraged themselves, and they basically screwed themselves because the government told them, don't worry, you can afford this house, you can afford this overpriced house at your current salary. And they couldn't, and they got wrecked.
Well, hold on.
Reminds me of the 20s, really.
The government,
A little bit, yeah.
The market is the people. So
Yeah, that's. Never mind. Go ahead.
How do you
By the way,
rectify
I
that?
can still
The
hear
market
you
destroys
guys.
The people.
The market is the aggregate of all the actions that individuals take regarding a certain economic choice. What specifically happened in 2008 was that the government was incentivizing people to get loans who the market deemed previously should not get loans because they're too high of a risk. And then the market tried to package those things together, and then ultimately it fell apart inside the market, and then all the effects went downhill from there, which is that you started seeing the myth that real estate only goes up. And then the minute that real estate did not keep going up because people realized that the market was oversold at that point, it dropped a little bit. So now all these people who shouldn't have had gotten those loans were now in a position where they owe more than their asset is worth. So that's what really triggered that snowball. But the reason that I asked this question, though, is because it goes back to the decentralization and the technology thing, which is that Friedrich Hayek wrote this book back in 1940 before computers or the internet or crypto was even an idea. And he sold best during 2008 because of the internet. Technology was the thing that allowed him to distribute the ideas, not like personally distribute, but his ideas were able to be propagated through the open source of all the technology in the market that allowed ideas to be disseminated through the printing press, through global markets, through modern printing techniques, and even just like the internet itself. So I would argue that I think Hayek would be very, very thrilled about the decentralization of power and the ability of markets to flourish in certain regards. But at the same time, I'm sure the dude would look at some of the situations that we've created when it comes to government control of things and government control of power, specifically federal agencies. I think if he actually went through the books and looked at all of them, he'd probably just keel over and die, or at the very least find the nearest trash can to go start throwing up in.
I would say that it's kind of been like a double-edged sword, right? Where we've used it to decimate and to just the amount of information that normal people can access now is just incredible, right? But it's also the amount of information the government can track on you. That's also incredible. So it's a double-edged sword. And I'll take it to what Ms. McGinnis said, that when she said that because of Bitcoin, we would, I don't, because of Bitcoin, if Bitcoin didn't exist, we wouldn't have these privacy things or decentralization. And I actually don't think that's true. I think if it wasn't Bitcoin, because humans crave freedom and independence and to be sovereign, humans would have created something else. And every time somebody tries to take our freedom, there's always humans that step in and try to come up with a solution to go around that. Whether that was one of the things that Bitcoin solved, right? But now Bitcoin's becoming more of an institutional thing, right? So what's the next thing? And we always have to look at to what's the next thing, because government always will try to encroach on our rights and our privacy. And every time they do that, it seems because humans have their spirit wants to be free, they are going to create something around that. Of course, every time they do that, the government's going to try to come and regulate that. And so what's the next thing we make? And I think that's the beauty of human ingenuity, that every time somebody encroaches on our freedoms and our train of thought, we try to come up with a way around it within the boundaries of the law.
Farmer, to clarify what I meant there, I didn't mean Bitcoin specifically. I
No,
meant the idea of that the people are able to make a decentralized currency.
Yeah.
Bitcoin was just
that's what I meant too.
Of course.
Yeah, that's what I meant too. That not necessarily Bitcoin, but it's something, right?
And that's what I'm saying is technology gives us the capabilities to create those things. That's what I meant.
And it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword, right? The government has the same weapons that the public has. Fortunately, the people that are like Web3, right? Web3 is very decentralized. Most people that work in the government, they're dumbasses, right?
I used to work for government. Right? Thanks, man.
And then not like I said, most people, especially, but we have a lot of people that work independently, right? Like when we talk to the post-chain community, right, and all these developers, you see how smart these people are, right? And how they're trying to solve problems and issues. And it's just amazing, like the amount of people we have that are actually looking to create solutions for problems we have. It's amazing to me, like just how what the human mind can come up with. If there's a problem, somebody finds a solution for it. And
Yeah, and
nowadays
that's
with
what I
the
was talking
internet,
about
with the internet,
lot
we can
earlier.
spread that information.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about a lot earlier, where people are going to continue on or continue to further the technology to be able to combat the government and their central control, because and you always know that you're on the right path because you watch how the government tries to corral something rather than just outright destroying it or taking it over. The internet itself, I mean, honey, you mentioned the dark web, right? Well, the dark web is actually the internet. That is the real internet. The thing is, the internet was so decentralized that anything could be plopped on there, and that's not exactly a good thing, by the way, because there's a lot of weird individuals out there. So what did the governments end up doing? Well, they created things like Google and all that, which I mean, enabled to find your way around the internet. You need to be able to type in keywords and stuff like that. So then they're like, yeah, maybe we'll just shoo these ones away, and these are the ones that we're gonna pop in front of your face. Yeah, you should go there, and like have a bunch of signs that say we're gonna point the direction. That right there, that is how you know you're doing something right. Okay, let's take Bitcoin now. All right, Bitcoin, they're buying up a ton of it and they're holding it, placing in the ETFs, right? Okay, cool. They're buying up all of the Bitcoin. They are trying to corral it so that way people can't really use it. All right, correct direction. Now here's the thing, you can't we as people who want to be free cannot sit on this one technology, be like, it's working, it's great, it's decentralized. You can't do that. We need to continue furthering it and making it better and better, and we need to do it fast, because these governments, if they don't like it, they're going to try and take that control and that power, right? And they'll get it. They'll get their way. But the point that I was making, this was Wednesday, was that there's such a huge unit, like a gigantic ship trying to chase all these smaller units just, flying off, right? You can't just, as a government, you can't just turn on a dime all of a sudden and be like, we're right on your ass. You can't do that, right? So that's what we got to do. So
Yeah,
there's my soapbox.
I was gonna say, to Nate's point, like, I find it funny how it's named the dark web, right? Which is actually decentralized actual internet. If people choose to do shady stuff on there, that's on the person and not the actual web. But it's funny how they put that name on it, right? The dark web. No, it's actually decentralized free speech web. But because of that, and like you said, the governments don't like that. They don't like actual true free speech. It's given that name of dark web. Like I said, I don't take away that people do shady stuff on there, that people should be punished, that do these, and we all know what kind of stuff they put on there, but it's actually decentralized internet. Like, but because of it, you're actually able to do things on there without censorship. And it could be as innocent as a simple blog about what you think without censorship.
I think another way of putting it outside of the dark web is a decentralized web. I would say it's more of a unregulated web, which allows you to be anonymous and allows you to operate in ways that you normally could not on the normal internet. And I think that's where you start to see those really weird activities going on that have like borderline questionable morality to them, or if they're just straight up outright illegal in some areas, but people are still choosing to do it regardless. It's pushing the limits of technology to allow you to have new capability. And in some cases, the capability is good. Unfortunately, in some cases, the capability is bad because it's like using it to hire a hitman or something. But Farmer J, I think you had a really good point there that I wanted to touch on as well, which is that you mentioned previously that the soul yearns for freedom, which is that in all these situations, people keep trying to choose out freedom. I think that's half of the answer. I think the other half of that argument is that the soul yearns for freedom once the corporeal form, if you will, as my friend likes to call it, or your physical self has been taken care of, which is that a lot of the cries for socialism and centralized control comes back to the idea that basic tenets need to be provided for, which is that people are worried about literally trying to stay alive and exist, and they are trying to have other people provide for that and get to the point of easement or or I guess comfort is more of a way to take care of it. Put it, which is that like your food, your housing, and your health is pretty much taken care of. Those are largely the three big things that I think people call for when it comes to centralized governmental control or socialist policy, so to speak. But then once you get past that, that's where you start to see people really kind of like push that boundaries, and that's where you get to the point where you were talking about, which is the soul yearns for freedom. It's once you have the bases covered, people want the ability to explore morality in their own lives and the world in the ways that they want to. And that's where they get to that freedom. So I think you kind of get these weird diametrical views, which is that there are the people that are searching for freedom and trying to escape governmental reach and authority and control. And then there are the people that are trying to cram it down in an attempt to get to a baseline, because it's either a real baseline or it's a perceived baseline that has not been met, which is that even in the United States, people are like arguing that like they're not being taken care of. It's like, cool, you live in literally the most wealthiest nation in the history of mankind at the current apex of history and time and society. And you are claiming that you cannot be fed, you cannot find a place to live, and that you are dying and that no one is helping you stop from dying. So it's the question of, is this actually happening, or is this perceived because you're just mad that you don't have the new iPhone?
To me personally, it's perceived. Like, how many homeless out here do you see that are fat and overweight? You're not starving. Like,
well,
you're not.
Farmer J, what's the saying? You've never heard you've never heard a crack addict say that they are too poor for crack?
Yeah, you never, like, yeah, I've never heard a crack addict make an excuse why he ain't got no crack to smoke. He went out there and he got it somehow, but you can't go out there and get what you need. And I think it's like this comfort of life we have here in America, where people are spoiled, where they think that other people need to provide these basic necessities for them. And I think we need to do a better job as society to teach people that nobody else is responsible for you but you. Like, we should have something in place where if you come on hard times, which I believe that's what the social programs were intentionally intended for, to help you get get you back on your feet. But people just want to use these things as a crutch and never let them go. Like, you just want to stay. If you need the help, that's fine. We've all had shitty times. We've all been down on our on luck, right? And sometimes we need a help and we appreciate it. But for you to sit there and demand that other people owe you things, to me, I find that as very bad for society, because then when you start getting enough people thinking that, then where did the producers come from? Like, people are eventually going to say, you know what? I can work hard, or I can just be a slacker and I can live the same lifestyle. And at that point, everybody chooses to be a slacker. Or for the most part. I won't be a slacker. I'm gonna take advantage of that motherfucker, but
you're gonna be the crackhead out here, never going dry on crack.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out there with Hunter Biden.
All right, tell you what, gentlemen, gentlemen and lady, excuse me, I do want to move us on to the final topic of the evening, which is more crypto talk, which should be fun. But I mentioned earlier that this book is largely written in a bit of a response to Robert Keynes's monetary policy, which is the idea that government spending is so large that it should be able to help correct for the good times and the bad times in the inverse direction. And that one of the retorts of Hayek is famously that if you do that, you're kind of just creating other incentives and you're ultimately going to create inflation. One of the interesting notes about this is that Hayek lived for a large majority of his life before the gold standard was replaced with the US dollar. And this was even when he was in the United States, up in Chicago, giving lecture series around the country, and then also being a professor up there, if I'm not mistaken. Which means that when he's talking about inflation, he's not talking about fiat currency. What he's talking about is too many dollars chasing the same products, creating scarcity. So one of the things that he's talked about is that if you use the governmental approach, you're going to create inflation, which is robbing people of their value of the money that they currently have. So my question to you guys is that, based on everything we've looked at today, what would you say Hayek, or where do you think Hayek would fall on the crypto spectrum? Like, where would he be in all of this, and what are the aspects you think he would really tie in on most?
That's a fully loaded question right there.
He'd be a Cardano maxi.
No,
he's a Cardano maxi.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's a world he never experienced, right? Like it's a completely different world. Even 30 years ago, we live in a completely different world. Like these things right here that we have, these phones, we didn't have these things. Like even when they did exist, there were these big old block things about this big, and it would cost dollars to make a phone call per minute. So it's actually something to think about.
That's fair. Tell you what, I'll try to make this a little more specific. So, in the last section of the book, he does talk a little bit about international relations, which is that if you try to centralize markets, if you try to centralize a market inside of a country and then you try to expand that into international trade, you're just again going to arrive at centralized control globally. But I think something that was not previously available for Hayek, but now is available through Web3 and decentralized money, which is it's something we've talked about before, which is that one of the best use cases for Bitcoin is that you really can't take money outside of a country. Like, go ahead and try crossing a U.S. border with over $10,000 cash or with gold bars in a suitcase. Let me know how that works out for you. But with cryptocurrency, you have the ability to transact money, or more rather economic value, so to speak, borderlessly, instantaneously, without very many restrictions at all. All you got to do is pay the gas fee and have a wallet address. So when it comes to Hayek, I think he would argue that Web3 is honestly like one of the most crucial technologies for having that international and global market available to you, and the ability to fight centralized control, which is that if the centralized control really takes over one currency, you now have the ability to transact it effortlessly, easily, and quickly to a different form of monetary value that you can still keep operating in if you find people to trade with. You guys think it's a good take, or am I missing something here?
With him being an economist and everything, the idea of actually printing money freely, being off the gold standard is something that he would absolutely despise.
Oh, that'd make him roll over his grave.
but I think that's like a 2-tier step thing, right? Because he was still, when he wrote the book, there was still the gold standard, right? So we went from going off the gold standard to now to crypto, where it's basically printing of money that's not a government entity. So I would actually be fascinated now what his thoughts would be from going off the gold standard to actually where we're at now to where it's crypto, and like this money is just printed. And I think on the book he talks about like what he believes money is, right? And what some people argue that why don't we just exchange goods for services, right? And it's like, no, like I want to exchange my services for money, because then I can take that money and actually exchange it for something else that I want, or I can hold on to that. And when there's something I want, I can exchange that for services or goods that I want when I want them, not at that exact time. If I render you services, we're not doing an immediate exchange, services for goods or services for services at that moment. I can actually take this money, hold on to it. In a week from now, if I need something, I can actually take that and exchange it for goods or services.
For sure. So, to give a little context to Mrs. McGettit here as well. So a little bit of backstory on Friedrich Hayek. He is originally Austrian, which he's one of the reasons why the Austrian School of Economics is called the Austrian School of Economics. There are other thinkers in that school, but he's from Austria. One of the things that he experienced in his lifetime was that Austria actually went through a hyperinflationary event, meaning that he personally watched the value of his family's assets get devalued practically down to zero in his own lifetime. And remember, we keep harping on it, this is written right around the time of World War II. What was one of the events that led to World War II? Well, arguably, it was the absolute decimation of the Deutschmark due to the Treaty of Versailles and having to pay it back, and how people literally, in order to buy a loaf of bread, had to take the wheelbarrow of the German mark at the time to go buy a loaf of bread. So like this guy clearly, even though like he lived a good chunk of his life in the United States under the gold standard, he'd seen the dangers and the actual impact firsthand of what a hyperinflationary cycle looks like.
And I would just say quickly, for anybody that still supports communism or socialism, speak to somebody whose family comes, if you're in America, speak to somebody whose family comes from one of those countries, and they'll tell you how they saw their country completely go to crap over a period of 10-20 years because of these systems of belief. Just like he saw his wealth decimate, his family's wealth, we can actually see that throughout the world now. And like you said, it's the benefit of the internet, right? You can actually see things worldwide of how things happen, like when things are happening at the moment. Like a lot of these things that happened of history before, we're seeing them again. It just keeps repeating. And as humans, I don't think we'll ever learn from our previous mistakes. And it's mostly because humans refuse to study history and look at, like, it's already happened, but people just want to turn a blind eye and say, no, we're smarter today than we were then. And we're not.
Yeah, the generational cycle, it does repeat, or at least rhyme. But the thing is, it's always different, the next time around. And it is unfortunate. People think, oh yeah, that's what happened back then. But this time is obviously going to be different. I mean,
we're smarter than that now.
We're still human though. That's the
we're not smarter than that now. Like we're
there's a difference between instinctive and in acting out of instincts and then acting out of thoughts, right? And the majority of humans are going to instinctively do stuff. So I mean, you got to bring that into, well, I mean, see, that's the reason why, just allowing the individual to just be an individual is, number one, the most efficient way possible that any government possibly could run. But then number two, I would consider to be the best way. Yes, kind of like with the example of the internet. Do you got some really bad actors out there? Yes, you do, because there are really bad people out there. But you also have some really good actors, and the majority are going to be good acting. And if you want a country that really has a great GDP, that is going to be on the forefront of technological advancement and everything, as a government, you just want to let your people go do stuff, right? That being said, though, you do need governments to regulate things, okay? There needs to be some kind of regulation, and I will bring that one back to the internet, right? There's some really bad stuff on the internet, okay? Because there's bad individuals. You do need a government. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. So to finish this off, right, and then I'll move it back over to Z, is you do need a government to set up rules and law. It's like law and order, right? You need a government for that. But the problem comes, and that's usually out of crisis, right? But the problem comes when we're now in a decadent stage of peace, where now you've got the government like, what else can we start trying to control around here, And that's when you start getting the weirdos, like in the Paris Olympics opening here, and you're just like, what on earth is going on over here? Why is this a thing that we have to go and see,
True.
So,
to tie it all back together, I think Paul Sachs has the comment of the stream right here, which is that the tragedy of the commons and normalcy bias equal humans are doomed to cycle theory. On the macro, we always will be. And I think this is entirely correct, which, Nate, to your point that you just made, which is that, like, there is a legitimate role of government. And even inside of an economic sphere, there's a legitimate role of regulation and governmental authority in a free market, which is to ensure that the markets are fair and that there's no bad actors. Unfortunately, due to human nature and the corruptibility of us all, people are going to be prone to cheat or break the rules or bend them too far at certain points. And that's exactly where governmental legitimate authority comes in. And when it comes to the idea of the tragedy of the commons, that is exactly where governmental function is at its best. When it comes to defending the country and the people inside of it, and ensuring that they're not self-imploding and they're not being taken over by the Mongols. And that also internally, when there are things that the free market cannot fix, such as the tragedy of the commons, that is a place for legitimate governmental authority, in my personal opinion. But the other half of his comment there, which is the normalcy bias thing, which is that you might get a little too comfortable. You might start to believe that these things are normal. It means that we unfortunately go through the cycle theory, which is it's the bad times create good men create good times create bad men create bad times. It's like, yeah, that's cycle theory for you. But when it comes, the goal should be that throughout human history, people have learned at least a little bit. I think that's very obvious through the progression of everything that we've had. which is that you obviously had the very ancient civilizations where technology was very primitive, resources were scarce. And back in the times, you could look at something like Egypt, which was a very centralized command economy, which is that there were some very educated, highly capable people at the top that were trying to plan the economy. But ultimately, as conditions changed, they were unable to adapt to it. The crops started dying off, the people went hungry, and the people started revolting. And then it's right around that same time that we have that bit of that lost age, the lost era right around the Bronze Age, and we literally see the loss of technology because of the death of certain civilizations. We've obviously gotten a lot better since then because civilizations have come back. We had the Roman Empire. We went through the Middle Ages, we went through the Enlightenment, we went through industrialization, and now we're at the modern age, and some might even argue the postmodern age, which is that we have learned a bit. But at the same time, we keep learning because we keep failing. And out of the failure, there are lessons learned. So, I mean, it's a bit of a black pill take here, or maybe a little pessimistic, I'll call it that. How about instead? Which is that I know we're over here preaching the wonders and talking about how Web3 and cryptocurrency investment is one of the great ways to escape the failures of the late 20th century and fiat currency and governmental control over monetary policy. But at the same time, understand that there's going to be a failure of Web3 at some point that's going to lead to Web4.
Question for you, Zenith.
Hit me, brother.
Why don't we just get rid of the cycle theory thing? Hear me out. So if we just all agreed,
failure
take
theory.
Our children. Let's move everybody. First of all, move everybody out of Australia, and then everyone agrees.
Out of the penal colony, yes.
Yep. That when you have kids, you got to ship them off to Australia, and then we're gonna let some like batch number of like the top ones join the rest of the world, and you do it like every year. So basically, like everyone comes from hard times. If you can do that, then
Are you talking about establishing a Hunger Games of the? Are you talking about establishing a Hunger Games of the children, or rather, we need to create artificial hardship to create good people?
Artificial hardship.
Sam just basically described the plot of Battle Royale.
Well, it wouldn't.
I love how
it wouldn't be artificial, right? You literally.
Oh yeah.
You would throw
artificially
them out
induced,
there, like
but the real shit is hard.
If they didn't survive, they wouldn't survive.
Hardship is real.
Yeah, but I think that's the problem. I think when we were talking about like everybody's allowed to vote nowadays, and it's funny because some people don't have any skin in the game, right? I think we've all seen like Starship Troopers, where I think citizens are only citizens are allowed to vote. Everybody else is considered a civilian. And only citizens are people that are actually serve their country. And those people are the ones that are actually put skin in the game. So now you're allowed to make decisions for your civilization, for your society, right? And I think that's where we're failing now. We have a lot of people that don't have any skin in the game that are allowed to make decisions.
I think you're entirely correct. And I know we obviously didn't have the gang together for when we covered the law by Bastiat. And one of the things that we didn't get to on that stream was that Bastiat is actually very critical of the idea of universal suffrage. And even inside of the law, he points out, he's like, look, you don't let children vote. So clearly this is a lie. So why are you letting everybody vote? Because they're just going to vote to be able to do their own stuff. But to Sam's question,
I think there's a woman joke in here or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Their frontal lobe isn't developed yet.
No. This is, I think, Farmer Jay and Sam, you guys are right along the same track here, which is that why do we not artificially create hardship for people to become good people? At the same time, it is the Starship's Trooper answer, which is that understanding that part of being a citizen is trying to understand the political power that you wield. By being able to vote means that you are able to vote your fellow comrades to go fight the bugs and die.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe hardship is required for people to truly understand the political power that they wield. Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know if we're at the point where we can start to pull back on suffrage, because in my personal opinion, and I'm not going to speak for Christian Hines on this one, but I was listening to one of the podcasts that he was doing recently, and he was like, yeah, universal suffrage has not exactly worked out super well, and in fact, we might do good to pull it back a little bit and ensure that the people that have the political power are the ones that have the skin in the game. But yeah.
And realistically, Sam, like the best place to start is with the 19th. We just if we chop that one right off, Rip off that Band-Aid. It's as good a starting place as any. Go ahead, Zenith.
Oh, I didn't have anything. I just
Oh,
wanted to
you're
make
gonna
sure that
toss
we
it
answered.
there.
I just wanted to make sure that we answered Sam's question sufficiently, which
Oh,
is
okay.
why not create hard times? And I want to toss it over to you guys, which is that I personally don't think that you should have the whole point of having society is that you're not forcing a hardship on other people through your own actions, because that's literally causing pain and suffering to people, which in this context we are referring to as character building moments, shall we say. Correct. This conversation turned into Lord of the Flies real fast. Absolutely correct, both sacks. I was thinking about that book earlier as well when Sam threw out the idea of put all the children in Australia. I was like, oh God, I thought they already wrote a book on this one. But I'll put it to you guys. It's this, which is that do you think the hardship needs to be thrust upon people, or that people need to thrust themselves into hard scenarios to be better people?
I think that it should be up to the people like to thrust themselves into it. And I wouldn't necessarily say like suffrage, but more like a rite of passage. If you want this status, then you must go through this. And I think in society, especially for males, in most westernized countries, the rite of passage of males has been slowly stripped away. Like you used to have to go through some sort of ritual to gain your status in your community and have respect. Nowadays, it's just like, hey, well, you turn 18, you can vote. Here's a pamphlet. Just sign your name here. I'll fill it out for you. And I think we've gone as society away from the rites of passage, especially for males, where you need to endure some sort of hardship. But you need to be able to say, hey, I want to do this. I want to partake in this. And this is my rite of passage into manhood. And nowadays, we don't have that. We just have a bunch of people that are soft as hell. And these are the people that make decisions alongside with us. And like I said, they have no skin in the game. They've never had any adversity thrusted on them. They think that life is just rainbows and butterflies and what easy life. And life isn't like that for most of the world. But here in America, like there is no rite of passage for men. Like everybody, just when you reach a certain stage in life, you're considered a man. And most of our society, that has not been the case, whether it be Europe or any of the Americas or Africa or Australia, China, the Asian nations, none of them have been like that. There was always a rite of passage for men to be actually have a status within their society. And that's slowly gone away. So maybe the colony that Sam's talking about is the way to go.
Farmer
Sam,
Jay,
what you got?
Yeah, so what if instead of sending them all to Australia, we just agreed, first of all, that like let's focus on the boys, and after they turn the age of 2, get them in a morning routine where you stick them maybe like halfway submerged in like quicksand, and just don't set them all the way in it, but like halfway, and then they can decide how to get it out. And like, do you think that would do it?
I think a lot of babies would die, but the survivors would actually be very strong individuals. But I don't think as a society we want to go as that.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that a lot of kids would have some traumas growing up, and then you have problems with psychologists, right?
No, that's all made up. The only thing I
these
see
all sound like good
you would have
reasons to me.
You would have survivors, and we wouldn't have as many meth heads. The way I see it.
My solution would be something super simple, right? Turn 18 and you mandatory have to go to basic training and or be in the military for
I mean
maybe a year, right?
I mean there's one example we have, right, is Israel, right? Israel, you have to serve your nation. Like it's mandatory. All males, all females have mandatory service. And after that point, like I said, you have skin in the game. But I think we give too much power today for people that have never put in the skin in the game and never will. And I think that's a detriment to society, because when you have no skin in the game, you don't care about other people. All you're doing
for me.
Well, because you're just going to be self-serving, right? If you're actually a part of a community, like if you're put into military service, right? You come together as a team, right? And you usually engage with people from throughout the nation, right? You're just not going to be with people that you grew up locally. If you serve in the military, you usually are put in a place where, like, you get to know the people from your whole nation, and
Farmer Jay,
get.
I'm gonna jump in
Go
here
ahead.
if you don't mind. So, Nate, to answer your question, I think one of the things that Jay is talking about here is the idea that having skin in the game is that you have a stake in it. You can kind of think of it as like a stakeholder versus a shareholder. If you have a stakeholder and shareholder is kind of pretty much synonymous in this one, which is that you have something to lose or you have a vested interest in making sure this thing goes well. For the example of the military, it's the idea that if you have skin in the game by being in the military, your ass is on the line. That is your skin in the game, which is that this political power has the ability to send you to the sandbox to go fight and die for whatever reason they decided it was. And then conversely, at the same time, even if you're not in the military, from like a societal level, you can imagine yourself as having skin in the game if like you're a net taxpayer, which is that you are not receiving benefits from the government. In fact, you're paying for the government. That is where you have skin in the game in the opposite example of not like literally your butt in the desert, but as in your wallet is in the game.
How many politicians would vote for war if they knew their kids have to serve mandatorily?
Correct. He's not wrong. Yeah.
Here's a
can we pull up the Pulsax comment real quick?
We got a little go ahead.
Founding fathers considered skin of the game to be property rights initially. Yep, this is the good old John Locke, not life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but life, liberty, and property, baby. Property.
Yeah, and that's the thing that would make sense to me is like when it comes to like skin in the game, it's kind of like there's a lot of things that you could define like within that, right?
Yeah,
however,
it is.
If you were to like bring it down into something very specific, right? That I think would work best as far as like the government goes is definitely what you said there, Zenith, with like taxes. If you are a taxpayer and you're out there doing a job, right, or whatever else that you own that you have to pay taxes on, if you're the one who's paying those taxes, then you get that right to vote. Versus I've seen a lot of these people, right, where like, sure, I mean, you can have a job and you're paying taxes, but you're also on a lot of different benefits, like food stamps and things like that. If I would consider that if you were on those things, maybe not so much you should be voting. That's what I think.
Net gain versus net drain. I like how you guys are basically describing decentralized autonomous organizations, proof of stake and proof of work. Like that's essentially what it all, like if you take your Ethereum or like, government services, and then you stake your life on the line, then congratulations, you get rewarded with yield. You get rewarded with the franchise is what they called it in instead of suffrage, they called it franchise in the Starship Troopers book. It was quite fantastic. But like proof of stake, you are staked in the system, so you get value from the system. If you're not staked, no sweat, no problem. Bro, if I could forego paying taxes to not have the right to vote, I would fucking do it in a heartbeat, because the right to vote is so meaningless and my taxes are so meaningful. Like I would trade that instantaneously. And the only people that want to vote, like be the ones that pay taxes, fucking A right. You guys go for it. And I will walk my happy ass out of this country. And
that's actually a really good concept, Will. Would you trade your vote for your tax dollars?
Oh, yeah.
Pick one.
That actually be not a bad concept. Like the only people that are allowed to vote are actual people that pay taxes.
Yep.
Because then, like, it's your tax. It's the collective tax money, right? That money comes from a collective of people that are actually putting into the system, and only those people should have a say so. But when you
it's almost like you're paying for a subscriction.
Yeah. But like when you have people that
did you pay your citizenship subscription this month?
Did you?
Oh no!
I'm gonna let my Netflix expire, and then I won't be able to choose the next president.
Sorry, we can share passwords.
Yeah.
So let's. I know we're spitballing this idea here, and I can see two scenarios. The first of is people largely. The people that don't value their vote are the ones who also are not the taxpayers, which is that the people that are willing to trade their vote for their tax money are only the people on the low end of the spectrum. But at the same time, on the inverse, the people that theoretically are paying a ton in taxes, it's like, do they really want that vote or do they just want that money back? But then the other scenario in my head is like, maybe those are the people that, because they already have so much, they don't need the money back, and they're willing to pay that money to get that vote. And so I don't know. I'd have to really flesh this out and really talk about it. But it's this system might incentivize the rich to give up their vote, in which case the poor are just going to vote themselves more of your own tax money anyways. Or it could be that the people that need the money the most are the ones that are willing to trade their vote for money, which is the lower end of the tax bracket. I don't know. That's an interesting thought experiment. We're going to have to give it more thought.
On that point, because you said the people who would give up their right to vote for their tax money are on the lower end of the spectrum, and I don't like that because I said I would do it. So I want to say, in my defense, the reason I said that is because I already don't get into politics and don't necessarily understand these things. So personally, I don't usually vote. Why? Because I don't think I should if I don't know what's actually happening. I don't think I should put my voice in when I'm not really completely into these situations to the point where I understand enough to make a very good, where I feel I have enough information to make a great decision there. So I have tended to just stay away from kind of most electoral votes on just my own end, because I don't know, that's how my brain works. I think if I don't really know enough about politics, I probably shouldn't vote for anything to be in there, because I don't know.
On the theoretical and philosophical level, I would absolutely commend you for that sort of thinking, which is that if you don't know what you're voting on, maybe don't vote. At the same time, though, you do have a vote, and you can choose to do whatever you want in the system that we have right now. But at the same time, I think you're showing a level of self-awareness and not selflessness, but I'll say not selfishness, that I think, unfortunately, a good handful of people are operating in our country. And I'm not going to totally fault them for it, because I think part of it could be out of the desperation thing that I was talking with Jay about earlier, which is that if you have a certain level of lifestyle and you've escaped the threat of hunger, thirst, and shelter, then you have the ability to operate on that higher level of thinking, as opposed to if you are not already there, then yeah, you're going to use your vote to ensure that it's insured for you.
Man, this is so close to DAOs, like this trading the voting for money thing. 'Cause it's like that's literally how DAOs work. Yeah. Is like the more tokens you hold, the more of a vote you get. So if you want to in
the game you have,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it's like, if you want to determine like, hey, what are we going to use to collateralize, DAI, or I don't know. I don't know a single DAO off the top of my head. I know that they exist. Right. But like,
cough, two fucks exchange. Cough,
oh, 2 fucks. There you go. Right. So if you want to,
I never thought of it that way, but damn, that's spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, if you want more voting power, you pay more taxes or something. Right. And it could be blanket, it could be percent, it could be anything. Man, this is gonna be a fun little topic of conversation. I gotta bounce here in the very near future, guys. Are we going to be wrapping soon, or what's our schedule look like?
Let's wrap it. Sam, tell you what, last word is yours when you're done with your thought.
Chat shout outs after, and then we can
yes. Sam, what you got, brother?
I think we're all being a little bit silly here, because you're theorizing that this world exists where if you have more money and pay for things, you get power and you get things to go your way. But that's actually just the way the world already works.
Yep.
True.
Lobbyists and money and
There's
stuff.
Just
that's all.
More steps. You're right.
Yeah.
All right. Tell you what, Ms. Producer, can you do us the honor? Shout outs for the final time. Ladies and gentlemen, we have not forgotten about you. We might be rambling ourselves. We're keeping you guys in mind. And we're definitely keeping Paul Sachs in mind. Dude, you got some good comments tonight, man. Paul Sachs, vote for Kamala for governor of California. Some people might argue that she's already run for political office a handful of times. And some might rightfully point out that in the last primary season for the presidential election, she did not win a single vote from her own home state.
Not one.
That just might be a slightly inconvenient truth.
Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard.
In response to this comment, I think this is why some people should make the conscious choice to not vote. If you agree with this, I know Paul's joking, but if you actually agree with it.
Yes, this is a joke. Correct. You do have a very good point on that, which is that the theoretical moral thing to do is, if you don't know what you're voting for, don't vote, because you believe that you can be misinformed and you might be inadvertently voting for the thing that you genuinely believe you're trying to vote against. So
Yep. I got a
wield
good
the
analogy
power
there.
only when you know you're wielding it justly. What you got, Will?
If you're blindfolded, you shouldn't swing around the lightsaber. That's what I got.
Some might also reference a certain manual, maybe in the military or something, with firearms, which is know your target and what lies beyond it.
Boom, baby. All right. Is that it for
else we
chats?
got?
Okay, we got.
No, of course not. We got Jenna Nelson saying, "Hey,
Okay.
Good to see you, Jenna. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate you coming up to the book club. You are part of the usual cast of suspects, or the usual." I'm butchering the phrase right now, gang.
I think it's the usual suspects.
The usual suspects. I'm just putting
usual.
It's Friday. We're tired.
Yeah.
A little bit, true. All right, Jenna, good to see you. What else we got? Agent J, our very own, he says the next step is to recognize the institutional encroachment into Bitcoin and crypto, and to not fall for the psyop. Precisely. We were talking about the technology. The technology is helping with the decentralization, but at the same time, the technology can also be weaponized by the centralized powers. So, stay aware, folks. Don't sell your Bitcoin to BlackRock at $45,000. That's how your kids ask you to disown them. There's a meme for that I'm referencing, by the way. Dad, what'd you do in 2024? I sold all my Bitcoin to BlackRock.
That was a hilarious.
Batman.
Alrighty, Mrs. Producer, is that it for chat shoutouts?
Yep, that was everything. We got a lot of good ones from Paul, but we already covered them during the stream, so.
True. I mean, I'll say the last good one from Paul is that if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. That really should weed out the weak quickly. Agreed, good sir. All right, folks, thanks for joining us for Book Club. We're going to go ahead and pass it around the horn. Final thoughts, and where can the folks find you? Starting with Nate McGinnis. What you got?
Hey, yeah, you can find me in the DJ Roundtable Telegram as well as on the YouTubes. Also, you can find me on X at the Ascending Man 369. And so, yes, right there. We got the Telegram right there.
Thank you, Farmer J.
I love it, Farmer. That's great.
Farmer J's got 2 arrows pointing directly there.
Inspiration from Will.
All you need to do is simply put your phone up there. Yeah, get into that chat, because we are about to get into a very fun place in the market. And unfortunately, if you're not prepared, if you're not set, it's going to go really bad for you. So you should get in there.
The boat will leave you behind.
Yeah, don't get left behind. So get in there, ask questions. You get direct contact with us, right? But yeah, other than that, just looking forward to the next stream come Sunday. Do you have any idea what we're doing Sunday?
Oh, I am sure we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin conference and everything going on from that, especially considering that we mentioned this on the thesis episode, which is that if you thought in the U.S. this has been a wild ride up to this point, especially with the political election going on, you have not seen anything yet. I think since we did the thesis episode, Joe Biden officially stepped down, and Kamala Harris got the nomination, and Kamala Harris has started to campaign, and the media is already starting to jump behind Kamala Harris after they were effectively kind of trashing her a little bit. So it's like, yeah, this is a wild ride. Buckle up, folks. That's all I'm saying.
Heck yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to the other Stevenson on the panel.
I'm like I was gonna say something, and then like the words just weren't there. Hey everybody, you can find me at I'm basically a draftsman at this point, and I'm gonna help people learn about how to draw, how to build, pretty much the same stuff that I've been doing, but I'm very focused. I'm gonna be consolidating on that, and so check it out. You can go check out my community at https://www.schoolwithak.com/fast, because that's what we do here. So that's what I'm up to.
True, Sam. I saw a meme recently that was the 2 guys shaking hands, and one of them was designers who don't know how to design properly, engineers who are bad at math, and in the middle they meet up at project managers.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's all right. That's what the construction workers are here for, to fix the fuck ups.
True.
Speaking of
They
construction
keep us
workers,
Do you have a school server, maybe, with information on building homes?
Yeah, what's the
Maybe
link? What's the link?
A bungalow for bachelors of some sorts?
Oh, he just gave it to you.
You can ask about that, but I'll be totally honest, guys. I am not referring to it by that name anymore. That name has been abandoned.
Very well.
Yep. We are rebranded.
Yep.
Yes. Brighter pastures.
So if you want to learn, go ahead and join the group. But
that's a pretty cool URL you got there. You said school.com/fast, right? FAST.
Yep.
That's a good URL. Good stuff. And on the subject of construction workers and things, Farmer Jay, where can the folks find you and what have you got going on in the near future, my friend?
You can find me right there. Lurking in the DGen Roundtable chat. That's pretty much about it. Other than that, I'll hang out at book club and I'll be lurking on the Roundtable chat. If anybody tags me, I'll be more than happy to answer. If anybody needs broke boy strategies on how to buy crypto, if you have limited funds and how to move money around, probably got some answers for you because that's what I do.
Excellent.
Other than that, I'll pass it over to Miss McGettit.
Very cool.
All right, so as usual, if Farmer wouldn't mind putting up that wonderful double arrow of his, I think you need a few more in there, by the way.
I took Sam's drafting class in order to come up with this.
So you can find me there if you have any interest in talking to me about whatever, I guess, what you would want to talk to me about. Other than that, I realized we forgot to mention what we thought of the book, the final thoughts for the go around here. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Again, I unfortunately didn't get to finish it, but going off of this conversation and the summaries that I read through and stuff, because I did look into a lot of information still. I definitely think this one is a very good read, especially if you are one of those people who is interested in learning about, the mistakes of the past and what we are doing now, how we are following kind of those same fallacies, and how crypto will, or well, maybe not will, I guess I can't say that like as a guarantee, but could and has a very good chance of helping us kind of escape some of these things. And yeah, that's about all I got.
Love it. Thank you very much. We appreciate all your excellent work behind the scenes, by the way. So throwing it over to our co-host, Mr. Will Stevenson. Where can the folks find you, my man?
So the folks can find me at will.pls.xfyi. But more importantly, tomorrow you guys can find me at Galloway Grill, just south of Springfield, where Highway 65 and 60 intersect, right around that area. I'm going to be hanging out from 8 o'clock p.m. to 10 p.m. and just chilling, drinking beers, and meeting up with the boys. So it's just south of, again, Springfield, Missouri. And I'm going to be there at Galloway Grill from 8 to 10. If you guys have any more questions about any of these things, then you can go right down here to this little link below, bit.ly/hex_meetups, where I and many other people organize small scale hex meetups. It's totally free. It's completely free. The way that this Telegram chat works is basically people just organize little meetups based on whatever part of the country, state, world that they're in. So I encourage all cryptocurrency members to go out and meet new people, go and hang out, go have a beer at the local bar, go on a walk down a forest, go, I don't know, shoot some pigeons or something and at your local pigeon shooting place. But yeah, it's super cool. So that's what I'm doing tomorrow. And then other than that, I'll be on the DGen Roundtable stream on Sunday. As far as my thoughts on this book, it's a very, I consider it a very high level education type book. I would say that this book is excellent if you are a person who is fascinated with history or economics, whether they be Keynesian or Austrian. And then I would highly encourage folks who are a bleeding heart socialist and like somebody who truly believes in this sort of stuff. I highly recommend that you read this book and suspend all disbelief. A lot of people, when they're approaching new ideas, they don't do a very good job of suspending their disbelief. So if you are a bleeding heart socialist and you just love the idea of socialism and communism and stuff, I would encourage you to read this book so as to broaden your understandings on what socialism is and how it comes about being implemented in things. Other than that, like I said earlier, you guys can find me at will.pls.fyi. And Mr. Zenith, why don't you go ahead and take us out, bro? Where can the folks find you, and what do you have going on in the near future, my friend?
I will get to that, but I do want to dovetail on your comment there at the end, because I think it's actually a fantastic one. First and foremost, I will always tip my hat to you, because you're out here doing real work, connecting real people in a real life. So excellent to hear that you guys are grabbing beers with the boys tomorrow. I wish I was in Missouri, because otherwise I'd be there. But your point about this book is for the socialists and approach it with an open mind, I would argue that this one is paired along with The Law by Bastiat. This book tackles socialism from more of a practical and economic perspective. The Law, which by the way is a lot shorter, I will say that much. Instead of a 12-hour read via audiobook, it's a 2-hour read via audiobook. That one tackles socialism and communism and protectionism. The Law, there you go. That one covers it from the moral standpoint, which is, if you get both of them together, I think you're going to have a holistic picture of the argument against socialism. At the same time, it's unfortunate that these books are more of a deconstruction rather than a construction of a positive view of the future and a society potentially. But they are very much a deconstruction of the most lethal and deadly and immoral system that has been conceived in the 20th century. This is me getting on the soapbox again for the final time, and I apologize for it. But socialism and communism, socialism unfortunately gets away with it because they don't have the brand recognition that the communists do, and the communists don't even have brand recognition that the Nazis do. And unfortunately, their body counts go in inverse order, which is that the Nazis were famous for killing 6 million people. Communists killed about, I think it was 10 plus million people, and socialism has killed almost 100 million people in the 20th century alone. So please understand that these things might sound noble and just on the surface, but when you dive into it, they are poisonous, deadly, and can be the absolute destruction of a society. So I know this is the crypto channel. We're talking about investments. The goal is to be the best investors we can be. I think that this book for those folks is very important because we are deeply, deeply steeped in the world of economics, specifically when it comes to currency and the idea of economic energy being moved around between monetary goods and cryptocurrency and other currencies. That is where we are at this point. But at the same time, this is a fundamental read, and I'm going to argue that this is possibly one of the 100 most famous books in the world, which is that Road to Serfdom is possibly the number 2 most important modern economic theory book. So that is why I want to talk about it here. It was also a recommendation from Christian Hines when he came on. That was a fantastic show. I'm going to keep trying to shout it out. To thank him for coming on and sharing all the wisdom that he did with us. But also I do genuinely believe it's a bit of the magnum opus of the book club so far at this point, at least for me. I know these guys produce great work, even on the shows that I haven't been here, which unfortunately has been the last 2 shows of Will's. But I will be here for the next one, which, by the way, we didn't shout it out. Will, what's the next book?
Oh yeah, so we're going to be covering the second half of Patrick Lencioni's work, which is it's his original book, is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So if you guys are looking forward to listening and learning more about how people interact with each other and more stuff having to do with like social, like the brighter side of social activity, and teamwork and just how to get along better with things. The next book that we're covering next week is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Perfect. And then as far as what I'm covering the week after that, that's undecided right now. I was considering doing the Robert Keynes book, but at the same time, this is a bit of a dense episode. I don't know if I want to do those back to back. We might just read Starship Troopers. Who knows? Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what your thoughts are in the Telegram, and we will come up with a book together, because the point of the book club is not for you guys to hop on and listen to us talk about it, but hopefully it's a bit of a read-along so that you have other people to read books with. Because, I mean, Will and I talk offline, and this one of the best things about this book club for us personally is that this gives us that little social group that creates that social pressure to keep up with the books. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're falling behind. So
expand your mind and listen to other ideas.
Exactly. True. That is what I got. I have been rambling on this outro long enough. Thank you, everyone, for obliging me. Folks at home, you can find me at Zenith DI on Twitter and Instagram. Other than that, you can @ any of us in the DGen Roundtable Telegram group, which, again, just go to the QR code down below for the final time. There you go. That's where you can find us at. Let us know what's going on, what you want to see, what you want to hear, what your thoughts are as well. We talk about anything and everything in there. That is the best way to reach us. Other than that, we'll catch you guys on Sunday for when we probably wrap up the Bitcoin 2024 conference and who showed up, what they talked about, and also who didn't show up. That might be a hot topic of conversation as well. Anyways, that is what we got, folks. Thank you again for spending your time with us here tonight. We know that time is your most valuable asset. So every time you spend it with us, we want to make sure that we thank you for it and provide you value. So until we see you good people next time, I hope everyone out there continues to degen responsibly.
Peace.